Hello, I'm Sean Murphy, and this is Data That Moves Us, the podcast from the Limb Loss and Preservation Registry. We explore how high-quality data translates into improved outcomes that drive better care for people living with limb loss and limb difference. Today, I'm speaking with Fanny Schultea.
Well, Sean, thanks for having me today. I'm thrilled to be talking with you and sharing more about all of the things that I do and all the things that I hope for.
For those who don't know you, give us a little bit of background about who you are and tell us what you would want anyone who is from the limb loss and limb difference community to know about you.
I'm Fanny Schultea. I'm a certified prosthetist, orthotist. I'm currently the executive director of the Orthotics and Prosthetics Foundation for Education and Research. My background is clinical. I spent the last decade in the O&P education space, teaching at the Baylor College of Medicine program here in the Houston area. And really, the reason all of what I do matters to the limb loss and limb difference community is everything that I've done is ultimately to serve that community, whether I was working in clinic directly with patients in patient care or, in education, essentially trying to train up and provide the highest quality of education to the future clinicians that are going to be out there providing services and care to that population. And now with the foundation, sort of an evolution, really supporting the entire profession so that it is sustainable, so that we can, meet the demands of the workforce and the growing community of individuals who are experiencing limb loss and limb difference in the United States and beyond. We have some pretty significant workforce shortages. We need to make sure that we equip the healthcare system with the appropriate amount of clinicians, assistant, and supporting care extenders to provide care. Also, making sure that we generate the appropriate evidence to support the interventions that we provide to advance the innovations in care delivery, in the technologies and the devices that we're able to provide, and hopefully to close the gap with accessibility and equitable care for those individuals so that everyone who is entitled, certainly, which is everybody, is able to get the highest quality of care.
So I think people will be interested to know you're also a post 9/11 combat veteran. You served in the military police in Baghdad, Iraq. How did that experience influence the work you do today?
Firsthand experienced trauma myself and also those I served with who experienced a range of traumatic events, including limb loss, polylimb loss, significant trauma, traumatic brain injuries. It runs the gamut, and I've seen the impacts of war emotionally, physically on people. I've felt them myself, and my time in service has influenced my leadership and my sense of service and my commitment to the active duty and veteran community. So those are definitely a pretty significant proportion of the folks that we take care of as prosthetist orthotists. And, they really drive a lot of the innovation in the research space as well. And so I think my my inspiration to get into this profession in the first place was driven with some of my firsthand experiences with my colleagues in arms and seeing the care that they received and how they were able to be restored in their mobility, their independence, and their dignity through prosthetic and orthotic rehabilitation. It's pretty awesome. Definitely inspired me to change professions and enter this field.
So definitely you're a very mission-driven person. In your role as executive director for the O&P Foundation, tell us about the mission of that organization and how that organization impacts the lives of those in the limb loss and limb difference community directly.
Yeah, so our mission is to provide funding opportunities for the professionals in O&P. So we have sort of three pillars under which our funding programs fall. So we have the education pillar, which provides scholarships and awards to pre-matriculating students and residents. These are not just orthotic and prosthetic clinician residents and students. These are individuals who will be providing O&P care as assistants, as mastectomy fitters, as orthotic and prosthetic fitters, as well as podorthists and the technicians who build the customized devices for patients. We have a research pillar as well. So we support research grants to early career scientists to really bolster the clinically relevant and really clinician-driven research in our profession so that we can, bridge that gap between innovation and technology in the device manufacturing space and the care delivery that has to exist in this healthcare ecosystem. And so we really need these translational science and clinically relevant research initiatives, and it's really critical for us to support the early career scientists as they progress into O&P rehab research. And with the recent federal funding cuts across healthcare research, and certainly in our space, it's critical for an independent organization like ours to continue to bolster the support we provide to researchers in our field. And then finally, certainly last but not least, is our professional awards pillar. So this is a little bit newer, and we're looking to provide funding programs to support and elevate the education and the training of existing clinicians and existing practitioners to really maintain accountability for quality standards, to continue to advance their technical and clinical skills so that they can continue to provide the highest quality of care. And I think, the biggest thing here is through all of our programs, we're also looking to directly measure the impact that those programs have on patients. Yes, it's wonderful that our programs are impacting the individuals who are receiving the funding opportunities, but at the end of the day, it's really about improving the quality of patient care. That's the vision of the organization. And the way we do that is by supporting the community that cares for, develops the evidence base, and supports those patient communities. So, we may have a scholarship recipient who, is encouraged and supported as they progress through their professional career and get to clinical practice, where they're able to take care of 1,500, 1,600 patients every year. And over a decade, that's, a significant dent in the tremendous and increasing patient populations that we serve. And we want to keep clinicians in practice, and we want to continue to advance patient care. So that's how we impact the patient community. And we're looking more and more to effectively communicate exactly how that direct impact looks.
So with the education and the research and the patient care, all of those involve data. We've been talking about the importance of data and the importance of data to patient care. For the person living with limb loss or limb difference, or the O&P practitioner may be concerned with sharing their data, or why sharing their data could be dangerous or unsecure. What would you say to them as far as being afraid to share their data for the purpose of education or research or improving clinical care?
Yes, I think I'll start just by saying why we value data as an organization and why we use it and why we need it. So, we can't create funding programs without data, meaning we have to know how many people are out there who would be receiving potentially these funding opportunities so we can figure out, how many opportunities to offer. We need to know what the need is, right? What are people's challenges and hardships and experiences? And for us, we get literal data, from databases, but we also conduct focus groups and really engage with our stakeholders to get that information. And then once we get a full picture between, the narratives that we're hearing from the community and the kind of hardcore data that we're getting from organizations and industry, then we can marry the two to create a bigger picture to inform what we're doing. And then, internally, we need to collect data on our own processes and the way we go about doing things, the way we administer programs, how we award the funds, and how we track, so that we can continually improve what we're doing and, essentially offer better opportunities as the years progress. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to satisfy the needs of the community, continue to improve, to enhance the opportunities. And I would say that the same thing is true for clinical practice. First of all, you can't improve what you don't measure. So that's part of it, right? We should, and I believe that healthcare is very much in a state of the desire for continual improvement. Quality assessment is critical. It is critical today in the healthcare system for reimbursement, for demonstration of value of services and care provided. This is something that's pretty new in the discourse in the O&P space. So I understand that, talking about measuring quality, talking about measuring and collecting data, and let alone sharing data, is very new. So it's completely understandable that there's a level of hesitation and uncertainty, and maybe even some assumptions that are made. We hear every day that, data is being breached. Data is being shared in ways that we don't want. And so, we have this combination of lack of familiarity with data collection and data sharing, and then you sort of have this cultural narrative and things that you may hear out in the ether that not all data is safe. But the reality is that when we data share in healthcare, it is safe. It is safe because of the infrastructure that's built out to acquire the data, but also the way the data is acquired and what is actually pulled is completely de-identified. And we also have to understand what the intent of the data is. The intent of the data is not to figure out what you're doing. The data is really designed to figure out, is what we are doing as a whole effective for our patients? And what can we learn from that? And so I think, even backing up all the way at an individual clinical practice level, I think we meaning the O&P community, needs to recognize that first we need to collect the information. We need to know what information we want to get. We need to know what we're going to do with it when we get it. And then we need to try to get it regularly. And I think that's really step one, is to think about how our own relationship as a clinician is with data and how we plan to use it in our everyday practice, right? How did I approach that patient? Was it effective? Let me assess, how I went about going about that treatment plan. Is there something I can improve? Is there something I collected that will inform me about that? And how do I improve it next time? And then how do I look at that time next time to make sure that I'm continually improving? And once we feel really comfortable with that, we understand the bigger intent of aggregating large amounts of data, which the LLPR is seeking to do. And we have a better appreciation for why sharing the work that we're doing, the outcomes and the processes, how that can really look on a bigger scale. It's kind of like, and I think I may have been sharing this the other day, it's like you're looking at a giant table full of puzzle pieces, and you have no idea what image is going to create. But as you start putting the pieces together, which are the data points, we start to make a clearer picture of what's in front of us. And how glorious is it to start to make out what you're putting together? And so everybody who participates, everybody who shares their data is just contributing to putting that puzzle together. And then when we see the full picture, we can actually understand what's in front of us, what we want to do with it, how we want to engage with it. And, it's really, really powerful. But I think there's a few steps to take before we can really appreciate not only the value of collecting data and then the value of sharing it, and also educating ourselves on how that's done can really help to mitigate some of the concerns around safety, data safety, and security.
Exactly. I like the analogy of the puzzle. The big picture is always great, and it's nice to see when the picture comes together. And I think for me, it's always interesting with data when you find something that you weren't looking for, because you always have kind of preconceived notions of what you're looking for with data, but there's always things that you find that you weren't looking for, and that's what I find interesting with data.
Has there been a time when data helped you?
Yeah, I can honestly speak about myself. Unfortunately have experienced some kind of anomalous healthcare issues. And I think this is particularly relevant in scenarios where you might be experiencing a condition that's not very common, or you're sort of in a niche space where there's not, a lot of people around that might be able to draw that information from. So I had a couple experiences. So about 10 years ago, I experienced a very unusual and very rare circumstance where I had a stroke in my left eye. and it made me completely blind in my left eye. I, saw many retinal specialists and sort of became a case study, and is very unusual. Essentially, I was treated with an experimental series of injections in my eye, which, as terrifying as that is, the physicians would not have been able to provide me those essentially vision-saving treatments if it hadn't been for data that was shared from other cases around the country that were like mine. And there weren't many. Houston area, largest medical center in the world, and there were not many cases. So, talk about the power of a national group of physicians, in this particular case, retinal specialists, that pooled their data together for these really unusual cases. And it saved my vision. It was kind of incredible. I also experienced similar things with failed medications and receiving genetic testing. And, genetic testing is, it's all about data, right? It explains why the medications weren't working, because I have certain alleles and gene mutations, and it was incredibly empowering. And it took, years of frustration and disappointment, and it turned it right around to really have, again, being empowered and understanding why the treatments weren't working. And we could have saved more time had I had those tests done sooner, but still saved a great deal of time to go directly to the interventions that would make a difference. And I think one more example, and, probably the more heart-wrenching, is, my son had a very rare seizure disorder, and, testing all the time. And, it was a very unusual presentation. And, in the epilepsy research community, there are databases of various EEG presentations, so brain wave recordings, and they all look different, and some have, consistent patterns. And all of that is data too, right? It's not asking a patient something and recording it in the EMR all the time, right? It could be test results and imaging. And again, we were able to get an appropriate intervention for my son thanks to databases of EEG readings. And that was, very powerful. And it really could have moved the needle and made the difference between really poor outcomes compared to where we are today.
Thank goodness they were able to save your vision and help your son and help you along the way. Registries and data coming to the rescue for you. As you mentioned before, we have the Limb Loss and Preservation Registry collecting data, OMP data that's collected for research and education. So with all this data that's being collected for the OMP industry, what do you think the future of OMP could look like in 15 years with the registry? And what role do you think that, the data sharing and the registry would have in 15 years?
Yeah, well, I think a few different things. We may collect data, but we certainly don't share it. And we certainly don't have it in a singular place, which makes it very hard for it to be useful. I experience that with the work that I'm doing in my organization. We want information. It's kind of disparate. It's all over the place. No one's really communicating. And, if we all put that data together, how powerful it would be. And what a beautiful puzzle that would assemble for us as an industry and a profession. And so the registry it's the same thing, right? You're gathering all of this information. You're capturing, the sequence of care for patients, what their outcomes look like, how their progression in rehab looks like. The more information can go into that, the more powerful the conclusions can be drawn. As medicine, and I think OMP ultimately, ideally would be moving in towards more personalized interventions that are more custom tailored to the individual. And that really isn't possible without data. And also more patient-centered interventions, right? Whether it's, the manufacturing and then the development of new devices, new technologies embedded in the devices. You can't really inform that development without the outcomes data. Because ultimately, if we want to use quality as our benchmark, all of those domains of quality like effectiveness, efficiency, timeliness, accessibility, patient-centeredness, all of those need to be considered in human-centered design for prosthetic and orthotic devices. And so part of the future would be to have a centralized repository of patient data to inform design, but also to inform the way that we deliver care. We have a lot of, as I mentioned, inefficiencies, challenges in accessibility to care. Not every patient has an accessible healthcare provider for orthotics and prosthetics, within their community. How do we mitigate that? I think there's in case you've been living under a rock, there's AI that is going to, amplify all of our medical interventions, including in prosthetics and orthotics. AI is only as good as the data that you provide it. So I think, in 15 years, it would be amazing if we have these centralized, really rich data sharing pools like the registry. And there are many other registries out there today, all across healthcare. And, if you take AI and you train it on that data, it's incredible to think of how personalized and how different healthcare could look. I wouldn't even want to say that I have a crystal ball and will know what will even happen in 2-3 years from now. The progress will be incredible. But if we don't start now collecting data at the local level and then being responsible stewards of that data and of the care we provide by sharing it at a national level, prosthetic rehabilitation can look like, what healthcare can look like, is just not possible. Really, the onus is on us to step up and do this now so that we can realize that future. And also represent more broadly the whole national community. So, someone may say, well, why should I share my data if we already have big medical centers sharing their data? Isn't that enough? Well, actually, no, it's not. We want to capture the whole picture, right? Just like that puzzle. In rural communities, the needs are different. The patient populations are different. The outcomes are different. You never know what you're going to find. And I would say that's true in the relationships that we find in the data, right? We may be collecting something with a particular intent, and then we discover that really it's mapping out something that we would never have expected. And we can't do that as effectively when we don't have a full picture of the entire scope of the patients that we take care of. And so that's why it's actually even more important for smaller practices, rural practices, a broad spectrum of different types of clinical locations to be sharing into this bigger system.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is the key needs to be the data sharing at a national level. That's where we're going to get the richest data set is from sharing, and have a diverse demographic, geographic, as far as population diversity.
Absolutely. And, I think we all are aware that if there's not a lot of participants and they're not really representative broadly in a particular research study, that it's less meaningful, or we may not be able to use that study as effectively as if there was a really, really large, subject pool with a large representation so that we can start to understand the population more appropriately, and also understand how we provide care. Because it's different, right? It's different in big cities. It's different on the Eastern Seaboard. It's different in the West Coast. And, the way that our third-party payers, regulators influence care is also different in other parts of the country. So it's really important to capture that bigger picture and to also recognize the differences so that we can potentially, do some work on the legislative, on the payer side, on the regulatory side, so that we can, mirror where things are working best and identify where things aren't working. And you can't you can't initiate any changes if you don't provide data for the change that needs to happen.
So lots of work to be done, long road ahead.
It's a road that you need to just start paving it. Otherwise, you're just going to be driving on gravel the whole time, and that's not a real sustainable for your car, for your comfort.
Well, you've done some amazing work, and thank you again for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on Data That Moves Us. Whether you're a clinician, researcher, patient advocate, or other expert, your voice and your experience matter. Stay connected with us on social media through LinkedIn and Instagram. Together, we're building the evidence that drives better outcomes. To learn more about the Limb Loss and Preservation Registry and how to join, visit our website at llpr.org and become part of the movement.